So this is the node.js tracing workgroup meeting for September 25th, 2015. I think what we'll do first is just really briefly everybody just introduce themselves, and just so we kind of have names to go with things. I'll start off. I'm Pat Mueller. I work at NodeSource. I'm actually a newbie to this working group. Volunteered to kind of herd the cats here. And that's me.
I guess I'll go next. So I'm Bryce Barrel. I joined the working group when it first started, but I actually didn't make any of the previous meetings. My interest comes in tracing. In my previous company, I wrote an APM tool that did tracing for Node, and so I got interested, and yeah, and so now I'm also at NodeSource, but still interested in tracing.
I can go. I'm Yunnan Xiao. I lead the Node.js team on the Node.js platform at Netflix. And in the past, I've used dynamic tracing quite a bit with dtrace and Node. And at Netflix, we're on Linux, so we're looking for something else that's gonna be able to give us that same functionality in Node. So super excited to be here.
Great.
Hello, I'm Andreas. I've written several tracing-related userland models. So mostly my work is related to the async wrap interface.
Great.
I'll go next. I'm on Ali's camera, but my name's Matthew. I'm also fairly new to this. I've been working for the last few months on Google's trace agent here, so I'm also mostly interested in the APM use case.
Okay, I'll go next. My name is Ali. I work with Matt, part of Google, and so a few interests in tracing. One is the APM use case that Matt talked about. The second one is we're trying to make, and since we at Google, we want to make things easier for everybody from a V8 node integration point of view, from a tracing perspective. Although I'm not doing any of the work directly, the Chrome team is working on moving trace event down into V8, and in that form, it might become more useful for Node as well. So APM use case and trying to make tracing more uniform between V8 and Node. Those are my interests.
Hi, I guess I go last. Torsten, also work for NodeSource. I've been doing some work with also dtrace perf, also trying to integrate this with Chrome DevTools and other toolings to make this easier, see profiling data. I guess my interest is mostly in trying to make it even easier for users to profile. Ideally, you would just tell Node to profile itself, but I don't know if that's possible, but we'll see. And I have also been in the very first meetings, but have been kind of lagging, so I'm going to have to catch up. That's it.
I'm Steven, working at Nata, writing our tracing agent.
Great. Well, I think that's everybody. If not, interrupt me. So there is an agenda, kind of, at the Google Doc that's pointed to at issue 21, which is for today's meeting. The first item I have in there is to set some cadence for these meetings. So looking back on the history of what I can see so far in the GitHub repo, there were 2 meetings, one on February 5th and another on February 19th, and then that was it. So it's been 7 months since we had one of these calls, and it seems like we probably want to talk more frequently than that. And so I'm kind of thinking maybe we can try to do this once a month. If things end up heating up, like we actually have some stuff people can kind of play with or something, then we might want to go more frequent. But I think every month as a target would probably be a good thing to do. Any thoughts from anyone?
Monthly sounds good to me. I think at this point,
calls, and it seems like we probably want to talk more frequently than that. All right. I can. Why don't we try? If we want to try to do it more frequently, we can schedule one in 2 weeks and kind of see how that goes. Does that sound good, Nat? And Nat, you might want everyone else. Sorry, introduce themselves already. I think you missed that. You want to just provide a brief intro to yourself.
I'm a performance geek on the Chrome team. I built a lot of the tracing stuff that we're talking about in VA or integrating into VA. Usually, Fadi Miwad joins to represent us to this group. He couldn't make it, so I'm proxying for him.
Okay, great, thanks. So I will schedule. I'm happy to do it more frequently than a month, so let's go ahead and give that a try. After this call, I will schedule the next one for about 2 weeks from now. The other thing then to talk about is we want to have a regular day and time to have this call. So this is Friday. Fridays may not be the best day. I often find Mondays are not good days either. And time-wise, this call is kind of perfect for me. I'm on the East Coast, U.S., so it's 11 o'clock. I understand it's fairly early for a lot of other people. And I believe we had somebody in Europe. So this call was kind of late for them. So thoughts on days and times from anybody?
Actually, I'm currently in Europe, and this time is just perfect. It's like 5 o'clock here in the afternoon right now, so seems good.
Is there a reason we couldn't need to vote on this? Because that's what we do for the other working groups, and it basically lets everybody have a say on it, as opposed to a few people who spoke at the call.
I'm sorry, I missed the very first part of that. Were you suggesting like using a doodle or something?
Yeah, let's vote using a doodle, and that way we know where everybody stands.
We can do that. I was actually planning on doing that before the suggestion to have the call today was posted in the issue, and I was playing with Doodle. The problem with Doodle is I think it only lets you kind of easily offer up 3 days, and there's some kind of, you have to kind of hit something else to see more if you have more, and then it's maybe more than 5 or 6 got to be really unwieldy. I'm happy to do that because I have had success with Doodle in the past, but I guess it was maybe with a smaller time range. So yeah, let's go ahead and give that a try. And was that Ali that mentioned that?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to work with you to get that set up. And we'll do that offline somehow. All right. So we'll pick a day and time by a doodle for the next meeting in 2 weeks. Give that a try. All right. So looking at the agenda, and we probably should have had folks add their initials in here or something for the agenda items. The next agenda item says breakdown components, async wrap, pulling DevTools out of Blink, generic native tracing into smaller parts and define what work actually needs to be done to make progress. So that sounds great. As kind of a newbie on these calls, and I've listened to the previous ones, there seems to be a lot of different areas here, like async wrap, like V8 trace, other things from even just the issues is like native window tracing. And I don't have a good feeling for how all this stuff fits together. I sort of do, but it's kind of my view, and I don't even have that like written down or anything. But I think it would be good to have sort of a conceptual model of what we think these parts are and how they fit together, and that would include some text and perhaps some diagrams. And then if there are actually APIs that we're talking about, whether they're JavaScript or C++, it would also be good to maybe have just a very small kind of API doc, strawman doc, so we can start to kind of think about this stuff in concrete terms. Does that sound interesting, or does everybody else totally understand this stuff and it's just me?
For me, there's certainly some of these components that I know some about, and then there's others that I don't know nothing about. And it's possible that more of these components sort of solve the same issue. So I guess it would be nice if those that actually knows about some of these components could just sort of wrap up what they are about and what they solve. Yeah, I certainly don't know all of them.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I think it would be great to just go over the tooling that exists today, and those folks who are using them or developing them could maybe quickly walk us all through, and then we can go from there.
Great. So maybe the thing to do is the GitHub tracing repo currently has a README that just has a list of members, most of whom are not even on this call, because I've had issues figuring out how to invite people, and a directory for the meeting minutes. And this is the GitHub repo at the node.js org, and the repo is tracing-wg. So maybe what we can do there is just go ahead and flesh out some places where people can kind of talk about some of these components, just so we have some stuff kind of written down and not spread out across the minutes and videos and whatnot. So why don't I take a stab at that and create maybe a directory called documents to start with, and over time maybe that moves somewhere else, and then we'll create a document sort of per component. And so right now I think it's pretty clear we have async wrap comes up all the time in here in this work group, so we want to have something there. V8 trace obviously comes up a lot. Have a separate document for that, or maybe even a separate folder for people to drop images. And what else? There was a note on the effort at pulling DevTools out of Blink so they could be reused by Node. We can create a separate doc for that. It's not clear. Actually, I have a I have an agenda item for that one, because I think that one is kind of a no-op. But if as we get to it, if it turns out to be something interesting, let's plan on doing that. Generic native tracing, I guess I think of sort of platform-specific tracing, like the Windows tracing work that was done, that was mentioned in one of the issues, as well as like dtrace and LTT-NGU. And then somebody added perf events.
Yeah, I added that because we use that quite a lot.
Okay.
Here to do profiling and tracing.
Great. So what we can do is sort of create maybe a folder for each component, and then have sort of a top-level document that links those together, maybe with a brief description. At least that way we'll have some stuff written down, a place for people to add information. Does it kind of make sense for folks to add that to the GitHub repo, or there seems to be sort of a mix between using Google Docs and GitHub? I think I prefer GitHub, but would anybody prefer to do Google Docs instead? Good. And what do people think about this basic idea of actually, creating some doc for these components? Anybody have an issue with it, or other alternate suggestions? Sounds good. Unless you're on mute, talking, we can't hear you. So let's go ahead and plan on doing that. I think one of the things that may naturally fall out of that, as we see some of these components, we'll start to get a sense for how they actually fit together. Obvious one for me is like how async wrap fits into things like V8 trace. So just kind of solidifying that in my mind, how that works. Maybe a fallout of this as we start to jot some of this stuff down. Okay, next item there was a comment in the issue for this meeting regarding async wrap. Was that from Stephen, I believe? I'm going to go look at it right now. In any case, Trevor responded to it. Oh, I'm sorry, it was on Andreas. Andreas, you had posted a list of async wrap issues, and Trevor had responded to those. And I think where we stand with the async wrap stuff, beyond what Trevor responded with, is that there are still some open issues for async wrap, right at the very bottom of his comment in issue 21, which is 3/4 of the way down the page, maybe halfway down the page, is Trevor says, I haven't done much with async wrap for a while because this is the type of conversation I wanted to have before proceeding. When should events be fired, in what order, are things that need to be discussed. So with Trevor not here, it probably doesn't make much sense to have that discussion here, but to make sure that we queue this up as a discussion for one of the future calls, and make sure that we kind of highlight that as an agenda item that we will touch on a little bit deeper. But if anybody has anything to say about async wrap, in particular, now would be a good time to do it, I suppose. Anyone?
I mean, that makes sense. I think Trevor and I have some discussion on various of GitHub issues on what is expected from the API and as such. I think if you want a bit more history about async wrap, Trevor in the beginning created a no-call module called tracing, which sort of provided many of these facilities that I listed as issues right now, and then it sort of was decided that since we don't know what kind of events is actually needed from the user perspective, it's better just to have a very, very bare bone implementation of it, and then sort of have that discussion later and provide a more reasonable API. But yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. So that sounds like that will be a meaty discussion item for a future call. The next item in the agenda was a question from Quard, and is that Stephen, I believe? Yes. Stephen asks about the effort to pull some stuff out of Blink to make it easier for Node to be debugged with the existing Chrome DevTools. And I believe the response was, I'm looking here, from Yuri, was that says, I don't think tracing integration will be blocked by the relevance issue that came up regarding this new debugging facility. So I think this is sort of a no-op. Hopefully this will be a fairly independent issue. I imagine anybody working on Node debuggers will be interested in integrating tracing facilities, but we would probably, it would be nice to keep them independent in as much as we don't want to put any dependencies on tracing on any particular debug story, which seems logical to me, and essentially I think kind of no-ops that particular issue. Did anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Well, the reason that I brought it up was just like part of the DevTools is like tracing components, and I don't think it should be like blocking anything else, but I would like to see us paying like a little more attention to it and seeing if there's anywhere we can help out in making that all work, and like that's just one possible way that we can deliver a tracing tool to users.
Yeah, like I said, I would certainly expect that, and most or some Node debugging tools would want to take advantage of tracing. So using, for instance, this particular work that's going on as a testing ground for anything that comes out of this working group sounds great. They would essentially be, customers or clients of whatever work comes out of here. So in that regard, absolutely. And so maybe I'll just go ahead and highlight that. Will be a great customer for this work. Just as a kind of side note, and listening to the previous Hangouts, debugging actually came up in at least one of them. And I suspect there is actually a lot of overlap between people interested in debugging and this tracing work group. I don't think there's a debug work group, or is there? Anybody know?
No, there's no debug group, but I mean, I think it's a part of this tracing group. Like you want to trace where the error came from. So.
It kind of overlaps with both trace and postmortem a bit.
Right, the postmortem group. So, it seems to me I actually have a very strong interest in debuggers, and I actually contributed to WebKit Web Inspector back in the day. It almost seems to me like there should be kind of a separate debug working group that would be looking at things like the V8 debug API, the debug agent that had to get moved into Node, and that sort of thing. I'm not quite sure how how we kind of resolve that between the very strong ties between tracing and postmortem, obviously. Maybe I'll have a discussion with some folks and see if we maybe expand one of these groups to include general debugging, or if debugging itself is a meaty enough topic that it would warrant having a separate work group.
I think it also has to do with like what kind of debugging you're talking about. If you're talking about debugging in Chrome DevTools, definitely that's much less related, I think, to tracing. If you're talking about debugging from, let's say, GDB or LLDB and trying to resolve symbols, that has probably more of an overlap with tracing.
Right. I mean, that's a good point. You ask people, what their definition of debugging is, and you'll get 2 answers from everybody, if not more. Certainly from you, Torsten. There's also, I mean, normally when I think debugging, I actually think V8 Debug API. That's what I'm kind of thinking in regards to Node, but Torsten, you are obviously have a strong interest in much lower level debugging. That needs to be factored in to that as well. So that's an interesting topic. Totally independent, but maybe I can noodle on that and talk to some folks about that as well. Any other thoughts before we move on? All right, where are we? Getting close, getting close. All right, the last agenda item I have in here. I'm watching people live edit the doc right now. Oh, someone's taking minutes. Thank you. I'm kind of writing minutes down. I should have mentioned. I'm kind of writing some notes down. I plan on going back through the movie, assuming it's actually being recorded, and we can make more elaborate notes from that as well. All right. So the last agenda item I had in here was that the last call is specifically, which was February 19th, was really mainly about the V8 trace work going on at Google, and I re-listened to some of that this morning, and there were a couple of interesting tidbits, such as the fact that reference implementations were perhaps coming in a real soon now sort of implication, and it's been 7 months, so I fully expect Google has totally completed all this work and will tell us all about it. Kidding. But obviously, some time has gone on, and we want to sort of have a catch-up on what's going on there. So if one of the Google folks or anyone else has more detail on sort of what the current state is, that would be fantastic to tell us about.
Ali, I can say a few things, or if you want to, I'd be happy to refer to you.
Go ahead.
So the big, has it really been 7 months? This is how we get old. We've been focusing on sampling data and getting that into our trace pipeline. So there are 2 sets of probes, at least. One is about getting V8 talking back and forth to the embedder, in our case Chrome, telling us enough so that we can recreate the DevTools CPU profile view on top of the trace infrastructure. So it used to be that the way that when you saw the DevTools CP profile in Chrome, and I think this worked this way in most of the other embeddings of V8, you were talking to a totally specific thing to sampling profiling, so stack sampling. And we are really close to switching DevTools officially to the new sample data in the trace file. The way it works is that whenever V8 does JIT something or see a new function, it emits a record in the trace file saying JIT code added or moved. Here's the PC range that this function is at, and here's the name of that function. So you see a whole lot of stream of that, and then whenever V8 takes a sample, a stack sample, or the embedder takes a stack sample, we record the roughly the stack frames into the trace in a kind of space-efficient way. And so what you end up with is a file of samples and timestamps, and then you go and you look up that and turn that into real function names and stuff, and it's good. This now works, and it works in our Chrome tracing, and it works in DevTools, and I think we're just being cautious before we flip the switch on the official DevTools build. But that's real soon now in the small number of Chrome milestones rather than real soon now in the 7 months timescale.
Cool.
I just had a quick question.
Let me pause on that. There's a second half, but
that sounds really, really awesome. So is that something that I'm able to run? Say I have a node app in production, I want to be able to trace it, take CPU profiles. Is that something that I can hook up, or do I need a different build of node that I have to attach to the developer tools?
I think so. There's some you'd have to read how there's a thing called the V8 sampler in our content folder that you'd have to duplicate into Node. So that the sampling glue is outside of V8 and in Chrome, but it's duplicable and probably pretty stable or hackable, right? And if you then get that into Node or copy the way it works, then you too can have these trace files. Like conceptually, once you have this trace file,
once I have the trace files, then I can do visualizations of whatever I want.
Here is we're trying to take all these historic awesome features and get them into one goddamn data pipe. Pardon the expletive, but it's like get them all into one data pipe so we can then have ways to move the data pipe around and not reinvent plumbing every time, right?
So maybe as an action item, we should at least file something for Node so that we can get the same bits into Node.
Yeah, so so all of this, like getting profiles programmatically, works today. It's just like it's a different API at the moment.
That's correct, yeah.
And what Nat is proposing, like, if we can get traceand into V8 and then get Node to start using it, then we get one pipe with all types of stuff can be coming out of it, including tracing, all the trace events, and also profiling and whatever else you have.
Okay.
So today you can use the CPU profiler API that's there in V8 directly, and you should be able to get the same functionality. Just that is for different things you have to use different APIs, and that gets old.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly. And one of the things that for us, the working with merging the streams, if you will, allows us to do is cross-reference structural information with samples, so we can see stuff. Like this allows us to do more either headless or GUI analyses, like show me the samples, the JS costs only within this time range, right, or grouped by these time ranges, right? Because you have one file with different kinds of time ranges in it, and then you have the samples all in one damn file, so then you can do cross-referencing. So that's why we merged it into one stream, in addition to just the simplified plumbing.
I had a question with regard to symbols. Is this pretty much the same thing as what was written for temp files, the symbol information?
Yeah, it's very similar.
Okay. And I don't have to run, I guess, V8 or Node with the flag? Because before I would have to run it with the flag, so it would collect all these JIT code events.
Oh, no, I think you have to, so I apologize, I only know the bits that Chrome touches.
Can you repeat the question, Thorsten? I might be able to answer.
So my question is, since now the symbol information, right, about the JITted code is included in that format, how does it get in there? Do I have to run a node or V8 with the flag? Is there overhead for collecting those symbols, or how does this work?
So the CPU profile, you're talking about JavaScript, so a mapping from a JavaScript function to the code cache range, the PC range at which it's JITted, right? That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, pretty much exactly what's currently in the perf files, like in the /temp perf -PID files.
So that is part of the that is placed into the traces that V8 puts out today. So if you look at the isolate v8.log, and if you're running with the CPU profiler, those code ranges are annotated in there as well. So there's a few ways you can get at the same data. You can get the perf file using the perf events support in V8, or you can get the trace, which has all these code ranges and which what method or what function they correspond to.
Okay.
I don't think there should be overhead of a significant overhead. Okay.
That's what I was going to ask. Is what's the sort of the performance costs for this new way of getting, I guess, the translations of all the other types?
We think it's about the same as before, right? There was like it used to be when you did this, the same thing worked. It just went into a domain-specific data pipe, right? So we just made it. Now it's going into a common data pipe. So the part of the reason that we're being cautious is we're making sure that what we've done is perf neutral.
And great.
I mean, we had to do a lot of tweaking, and we may not be 100% done tweaking. Right. You know, like one of the things that we might end up doing is when we see the same stack in a row, we might change the format. So we just say, well, when we put it into the log, we'll say we saw 10 of these samples of this format, rather than right now we do 10 records. And so
yeah, because I think we submitted a patch to V8 for that same issue with perf events, where it was doing great, but it would faithfully print out all the stacks, and then your file would get to like 2 or 3 gigs every hour, depending on how busy.
Yeah, no, I mean, this stuff can get big.
So it'd be really great to think about like coalescing and collapsing stuff that repeats, because then we can run this all the time in production. And then whenever we need
one thing you could do is just take a peek at pop open Chrome, take a peek at what happens when you turn on Chrome's tracing with the v8.cp profile category on, and then you can look at the file, right? Ignore the GUI.
Yeah.
Look at the file that comes back and just start looking at it, kind of doing a mental critique, you know. And if you add me on Threads, I can add Alf, Alexei Filipov, who did he did the actual work here. I'm totally proxying him.
Okay.
So by the way, the issue was slightly different, the one you're mentioning. So the two types of things that you're talking about. One is multiple samples of the same thing. The issue you're talking about is the fact that V8 never reaches a stable point from a JIT point of view.
So the code keeps getting jitted, but that was fine. Like it's okay to continue to print out the perf, the translations, as long as they're different. What we saw is it printed out a bunch of other data. I don't remember the specifics. Yep. There was an issue on Google Code that Brendan and I filed a long time ago.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't know if you noticed, I got that merged into V8. So
yeah, that's great. That's awesome. So yeah, I just want to make sure that when this new feature sounds really great, like having one data pipeline, right? I just want to make sure that we are sort of working on aware of the issues we had last time.
You're asking the right questions. One thing I would circle us back to is one of the things that makes the sampling stuff particularly hard is that that's not inside V8, it's external, right? For good reasons from the point of view of V8, but it means that when we do something, there is work that the node community has to do to replicate that specific thing, and that is. That's the current shape of things, right? Hopefully, the the structural tracing, which is the next thing to talk about, that will be inside Node more, and so there'll be less. It'll be more along the lines of we all get it, right? Stuff we all get.
I just have one question before we go there. Like, so this is a total orthogonal API to the current V8 profile API, right? It's a totally new thing. Is that correct?
It's not an API. Like, again, because it's in content, it's a thing that we've designed. We've shown that you can just say start tracing. So remember, the way tracing works is you say start tracing, get me these probes, right? Kind of, it's like dtrace in that sense. It's like, please get me access to these probes, except we just stream all the results, right? Whereas in dtrace, you are, or many of these other sampler tracing frameworks, you're processing the crap as it arrives. So tracing is like that. And what our work shows is that you can do sampling into tracing and not die on success metrics. But there's no API in Node for this. This is just you do your embedder V8 or like content shell Chrome Node has to copy the sampling profiler that we've written, the new one, and emit into your trace buffer the new stuff, right?
Okay, thanks. That makes it clear. It wasn't clear to me.
So it's sort of like, if we did a block diagram, somehow, you'd have V8 down at the bottom of the stack, right? And then you'd have the node embedding, which would internally contain a tracing buffering implementation that would probably like fork out to many different backends, like LTTNG or whatever. Sampling subsystem would be inside the tracing controller, so it'd be a tracing agent inside Node that talks back and forth to V8, but that is more in Node than inside V8. But it gets turned on and off by the basic start tracing, stop tracing calls.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yes.
I think Patrick was onto something when he said we need some darn block diagrams.
Yeah, it would be really great to get an idea of what that looks like, so then we can go figure out how we get this stuff in the Node.
I personally can't volunteer to do it, but maybe Ali can corner a few people in a room and make us whiteboard, and then turn that into something that a grown-up would produce.
Yeah, so in a textual form, I wrote something in a previous issue in the tracing workgroup on what would be needed to pick up trace event.h and what are the components, like basically we need another thread that and a buffer that's the sync of all the traces that are coming in. So it's not a diagram, but yeah, it's a starting point.
Yeah, as long as it's something we can track into Node core and there that, hey, this is what we need to do to get this stuff into Node, and then we can get the ball rolling on that. That's a good start.
One thing I'm curious about is whether or not the current V8 CPU profiling API will exist, be removed, implementation maybe still there, but now it has a different implementation using the new stuff. Anybody from Google or anywhere else have any thoughts on that?
My memory is actually the V8, the public interface, like V8 has not done sampling in quite a while. And the sampling API is more about, hey, V8, give me a stack, and then like it's primitives, and then you already build a sampler on top of that.
No, there is a sampler within V8.
The sampler thread, I think you have to provide the thread yourself. I might be wrong.
Yeah.
As I recall, Jochen and the V8 team really, really hate having the sampler inside V8.
There is still one in there, unfortunately, at this point. So it's built on top of SIGProf, and yeah, so V8 prof or option basically enables it, and it works on Node as well today.
We should maybe make an offline thread and ask Alf again what the what the deal is.
Right. So, and the other thing I'll add is
I might be
the deprecation process V8 has is they don't deprecate things for the next release. They usually have a long like deprecate soon and then deprecate. So we can't speak on behalf of the V8 team. So API, what exactly is going to happen to it in the future? Only V8 team can directly answer that. So another thread for that would be the way to start that conversation.
Great. Let's go and queue that up then. Yeah, specifically, what I'm thinking is, I think it's in one of the V8 debug headers are things, that specifically, I don't know what the names are, but have to do with starting and stopping CPU profiles. That's the level I was thinking at, and I think of that in terms of API, even though I don't know the exact API definitions of V8. And I understand they change, and that's fine, but just trying to get a sense for if that existing API would still be there. There are certainly some packages that exist out in NPM, for instance, that make use of those. I think V8-Profiler, or maybe just V8 Profiler with no dash, is one of those packages. So be good to have as much send ahead if there's going to be changes there, especially as they relate to the new V8 trace work going on. Cool. Matt, did we kind of stop you halfway?
Oh, I thought it was good. I kind of paused. Seemed like a good breather point.
Okay.
There's the sampling stuff, and obviously we all agree that that's super, super important, right? The other half of this equation is structural profiling. So V8 does things that can be time consuming, like parsing and code gen, compiling, and GC and all these things. And you can kind of see that in a sampling profiler, but you can see that with structural annotations really clearly if you want them. And so the thing that has made slower progress, that has been chugging along very, very slowly for 7 months, is us getting access to that structural information in the same data pipe. Again, Fadi's driving it in his sort of 20% time, which means he's doing it when he can. We still have hopes that that's going to happen. We have increasing need for it on our side. We see sort of some scripts are 30, 40, 60% parse and compile. And so we need that to jump out in our tooling so that we can give people the right guidance and give our teams the right guidance. So again, when this lands, and it's more about a when, not so much an if at this point, but just like the when is sort of a resourcing problem. Once you have the same data pipe, which is this whole standard trace event pipe, we'll be able to send probes from inside, structural information from inside V8 out. And I think when we get to that, we'll try to figure out slowly how to encode things like promise dependencies and all that other stuff that async-grep has done before us, but do so in sort of a common data pipe format. But that's all kind of, everything there is just sort of dangling off of the basics. And I don't have like a really positive update there other than we're like chugging away.
Great.
I would say one thing is we might be tweaking the data pipe. So I don't know if this happens in the node, but in the browser world, you can have one tab open that has many, many different script contexts associated with it for different iframes and extensions and things like that. And for our profiling, we want very much to see the distinction between those. So we want to be able to display our data stream by domain or by which iframe is taking time, right? Like, oh, it's this analytics platform, and that's taking all your time on CNN.com. So we might be tweaking the data pipe a little bit. Again, this is the actual trace event format to include information when you add an event about not only the thread and the PID that you're on, but what context the event is from. And context is in reference to kind of a unified notion of frame and script context. So that'll probably make more sense as people start using tracing in this community, if rather people start using tracing in this community. But I wanted to mention that the basic data pipe is not completely fixed in time, and we do encounter things where we have to tweak it like this.
And yeah, just to give you a data point, we want to use more tracing, so we're using the tools that are available today. But if and when we get more tools, I mean, we'll definitely hop on board and get going on that.
Yeah, to add to what Nat said, so basically the equivalent of those domains and script context for Node would be isolates. So if we're running ever running with multiple isolates, we would want them the data for each isolate to be separated or not. That's the implication.
Yeah, thanks, Ollie. I forgot the words for the right layer. Thank you very much.
Cool.
That's where we are in tracing right now.
I get we don't have to go through this now, but I more or less understand the words you said, but trying to kind of fit it all in my head how it fits together, I kind of wonder, like, well, trace events I can already kind of provide some data, so why is the structural profiling an issue, and why is providing context an issue? Because can't that just be data into the trace event? Let's not talk about that now because we're actually running out of time. But if you could keep that in mind as we start to kind of build some docs in terms of, well, what I'll just ask it if it's not clear when as we start to kind of
just preach. It's a layering problem. It's just about where we can add the probes.
Cool. All right, well, we have 5 minutes left. We worked through all of the agenda items. Probably most importantly, we got a kind of a plan for the next meeting. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to talk about in a few minutes? Or maybe even we could talk about future agenda items. Because if not, we can give everybody 5 minutes back in their day. I think we can give everybody 5 minutes back in their day. So thanks a lot for everyone coming. I'm so happy that we kind of kicking this off. Hopefully we can continue and do more of these again in 2 weeks. Try again. So happy everything actually worked. I was very scared the Hangout wouldn't work. And I guess we'll see you at the next call, and we'll see you on GitHub and the other places we have. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for steering this, Patrick.
Thanks.
Bye.